Horin peered ahead into the gloom, noticing two shadows approaching from the depths of the corridor. "Looks like trouble's coming. Two figures heading this way," he hissed. Yet, as usual, Gideon and Aurelian were too absorbed in their bickering to hear him. Behind Horin, Aurelian's voice rang out in exaggerated horror. "You threw me! I could have been taken!" Gideon, unfazed, simply shrugged. "You were perfectly safe," he replied, his tone casual, as if tossing a sentient sword into battle was just another day for him. "Did you not see how good my aim is?" Horin, exasperated, finally managed to regain their attention and reiterated the issue, though Faraday stood off to the side, strangely distant, staring at the wall in a vacant daze. Balthazar's presence, always lingering in the back of his mind, seemed apparently stronger today. Aurelian, with the newfound confidence one would associate with an invulnerable blade, called out, "Stand behind me then, gentlemen. I'll not let them harm any of you. Gideon, point me toward the door." Gideon grinned, feeding off Aurelian's energy. "I'll kill every last one of them," he declared, marching forward, Aurelian glowing brightly despite the protests of the others. "Gideon," Jacob said, his voice calm but firm, "it's folly to head further into the darkness without knowing what else lies ahead." But Gideon was too headstrong to heed the cleric's warning. Horin sighed and stepped aside, allowing the barbarian to pass. Medgul stood behind them, his expression one of mild disbelief. He muttered a curse in a language the others didn't understand. Gideon's bold march was abruptly halted by the hiss of an arrow, which buried itself deep into his shoulder. He growled in response, gripping the shaft and tearing it free with barely a wince. Medgul, unimpressed by the hobgoblin ambush, raised his hand and muttered a prayer to his gods. The tolling of bells echoed through the air as his spell took hold. One hobgoblin grabbed at its head, blood pouring from its ears before collapsing. Horin leapt into the fray, dodging past the remaining hobgoblin with practiced agility. Meanwhile, Nyx, under Aurelian's control, darted ahead, her tiny form flitting through the shadows until she landed above the stone door at the end of the corridor. Gideon followed up swiftly, using Aurelian to slice the creature clean in two. The sentient blade let out a disturbing, ecstatic wail as it consumed the hobgoblin's soul. "Could you be any louder?" Medgul muttered, shaking his head. Narrow arrow slits lined the doors, and a volley of arrows whistled down the passage, though none found their mark. Nyx wasted no time, lunging her stinger through one of them in a pause between shots. A shriek of pain confirmed her attack had found its mark. Charging the door, Gideon let out a battle cry and crashed through, revealing a room swarming with goblins and hobgoblins. At least 20 of them. "Looks like there's more than two of them, Horin," Gideon shouted gleefully, letting his beastly side take control as he shifted into his werewolf form, fur bristling, claws extending. Meanwhile, Faraday snapped out of his trance, finally aware that he was clutching his staff instead of his bow. "Balthazar, stop taking over my body. This was not part of the deal," he hissed under his breath. "Oh, I wouldn't have to if you weren't daydreaming like an idiot." Balthazar's voice responded in his mind, full of condescension. "Maybe you'll start paying attention now." The others joined Gideon in the chaotic battle. Medgul raised his hands once more, summoning his spiritual guardians. But these were no radiant beings of light. No, they were dark and twisted figures, their ghostly forms descending upon the goblins, like the very embodiment of doom. Within moments, nearly all of the goblins were cut down, their souls whisked away by the haunting figures. Horin, wanting to contribute, set his arrows ablaze using his flint box. but despite steadying his aim, his arrow flew wide. Faraday, now fully engaged, crouched behind a column, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "All right, Balthazar. Let's see what this magic can do." He hexed one of the remaining hobgoblins and unleashed blasts of purple eldritch lightning, striking 2 of the remaining goblins dead. Jacob, maintaining his calm demeanor amidst the chaos, summoned his spiritual weapon, the swirling disk of light, threatening to take down any that dared get too close. Aurelian, still in Nyx's form, surveyed the room from above. The sight of so many goblins riled him up, his thirst for blood almost palpable. He returned to the blade, his voice ringing out across the battlefield. "I am the Goblin Slayer, and I'll take every one of your heads." But in his eagerness, he missed the goblin quietly unchaining a massive ogre behind them. Jacob noticed first, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. "I believe we have a bigger problem." Meanwhile, Faraday, shaken from his stupor, joined Horin, and knocking an arrow, nodded to the other rogue. "This is how it's done," before slaying one of the hobgoblin guards with a well-placed arrow. The ogre, now freed from its chains, grabbed a broken stone column and brought it crashing down into Medgul, sending the cleric hurtling into a wall, his body crushed beneath the weight of the blow. Gideon roared in fury, his bestial form charging the hobgoblin leader. Horin, seeing an opening, darted past the werewolf and pressed his crossbow to the hobgoblin's skull. "Dodge this," Horin growled, pulling the trigger and ending the creature's life with one clean shot. Aurelian's voice whined in protest. "That was my kill." Meanwhile, Medgul, barely conscious, raised a single finger towards the ogre. His voice was little more than a whisper. Let the bells toll. And with that, the chimes of doom rang out once more. The ogre's head exploded, blood and bones splattering across the room. As the dust settled, the Blackhearts quickly searched their surroundings. They appeared to be in a former barracks, long ransacked. Amongst the remains, they found an amulet bearing the image of a northern man, and a note in Goblin, written in haste. "Leave the cults alone for now, and they will leave us alone. We'll deal with them later. They don't go near the guard rooms. And remember, you can't get past the Crusher without the helmet." Horin, staring down at the dwarven helmet at his waist, sighed. Aurelian, of course, couldn't resist adding, "If only someone had thought to use that earlier." The group gathered their breath and bandaged their wounds whilst discussing their next move. They appeared to have encountered a dead end and would need to retrace their steps. They took some time to briefly rest, the sound of goblinoid voices echoing quietly from the large central chamber they had originally come from. Sufficiently prepared, Nyx flitted ahead, her senses sharp as ever, guiding them back toward the market chamber in order to delve further into the deep depths of Thalnoriath.